Thank you very much. First of all, perhaps, yeah, thank you so much for inviting us here. It's really wonderful us to be part of this interesting exhibition and to have the chance to talk to you here. So my name is Rob, and this is Anne, and we made Échangeur. And yeah, I guess this is our opportunity to talk a bit more about our artistic practice and our research practice. It is only a week ago that we came back from Kinshasa, so in a way we are still a bit recovering emotionally and physically from that trip. We went back to Kinshasa now to make a new film. So perhaps a form of fatigue will be present in our talk now, but we'll do our very best to give a clear picture of what it is we've been doing for the past few years. If we talk about our practice, it is kind of important to us to talk about colonial monuments, as they play an important role in our work. As one could say that what was once like a very compelling image of power, a significant way of representing the past, has become outdated in a way today. As the symbolism and allegories of these monuments have become incomprehensible to lots of people today, that their appearance has been criticized for its kitsch and its over-the-topness. Perhaps they're mainly considered as remnants of another time, in which they were using a different visual language, and that is just a form that is no longer all that relevant today. I think building, or in this line of thought, one could say that monuments are becoming more and more, or these colonial monuments are becoming more and more just another part of the urban scenery where ordinary people just play out their everyday lives. And there's like this one Belgian scholar called Bart Verschaffel who puts this quite beautifully, I think. He says that daily life does not look at the inscriptions. It forgets the names of those standing on plinths and it just minds its own business. But I think we would argue that monuments have not become an obsolete part of the urban environment. And we would go even further than saying that monuments add to a quiet naturalization of a certain worldview that can justify past and present forms of discriminatory violence. We think that, or it seems to us that monuments in a way can once again become compelling images and are still able to impress and provoke strong reactions, but with the help of a human actor. And I think I say this not only in reference to those who communicate through violence. I think we are far more interested in the way that monuments can be used by activists or artists to kind of communicate their own message. And I don't know if any of you is familiar with this image. It's a group of monuments standing in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So this is an anti-slavery monument standing in Amsterdam where someone put on these colorful hats referring to Black Pete. I don't know if you are familiar with this tradition of Sinterklaas and Zwarte Piet. So we have this thing happening in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in which there is this white male saint who is bringing gifts to children, and he has lots of black helpers who can easily be seen in a way as like his personal slavish kind of group. And this practice has been criticized by lots of groups in Belgium and primarily in the Netherlands. But like what someone did here is using this image and kind of the aura of the monument to steer its direction in a way that she or he thinks is more relevant today, and using it to still to question this practice that is still in action. So it are these kind of appropriations rather than destruction that we are interested in. And this form of appropriating monuments to communicate a certain idea has shown to be like a relatively fruitful way in Belgium to break the silence on colonialism. And one, perhaps like in the Belgian context, the most important example or a rather notorious example is this group of statues which is standing in Ostend by the Belgian seaside, in which we have Leopold II, who was the sole owner of the Congo Free State, who is sitting on his horse on top. You can see it here, perhaps better. And on the left side, you have, or on the right side, you have the people of Ostend, who are looking up to King Leopold as a way to thanking him for all the riches that he brought. And on the other side, you have a group of Congolese who are also looking up, thankfully, thanking the king for bringing civilization to Congo. Then what one activist group did, they cut off the hand of one of the bronze Congolese standing there, in reference to this very violent practice that was in place, in which Congolese workers who were not capable of producing enough cotton, they would be punished by losing their hands. So it is a way of also using this monument to kind of communicate another vision, another version on this past. And what actually happened there is right after this activist group, they cut off the hand, no one really noticed. It's only 3 days later when they informed the government and they informed journalists that it kind of caused outrage and a discussion nationwide, both on like the colonial past and how we are representing it, as well as it called for the attention of international media. And I think this is an interesting moment, because if we would think that like the Colonial Monuments faculty, its potential is only limited to a sort of implicit naturalization of a certain version of the past, one would not assume that it can cause outrage, that it can really provoke discussion on such a level. So it kind of seems that even though we claim not to notice that the monument is there, we might say it has become invisible, that we still assume its endurance in a way. And when its continuity is broken through change or destruction, the invisible is rendered visible anew in a way. And it once again becomes a highly charged representation that is able to arouse awe in its onlookers. I think it kind of seems that the monument has maintained a sort of sacredness. And this maintained sacredness, this dormant potential, kind of provides it with the possibility of once again becoming a very active and convincing medium. And we see this also up to a certain level with official commemorations when monuments are being activated, but it seems far more striking when the codes or the expectation is violated. So in an image like this one, in which someone painted King Leopold red, there are, I'd say, two types of tension that are emerging. We have a tension between the different meanings, the intended meaning of the monument, just a festive celebration of a proud king, and this new meaning, like an image of a king also responsible for the death of millions. But also a tension between the expectations we might have about the monument and what is actually happening, as you might expect the monument to be durable, to be endless, to be timeless, and to say the least, something that is not subject to change, but suddenly this does seem to happen. So I think this potential that is there, this potential to kind of reactivate the monument and create these tensions is what makes it really interesting for activists and city makers in a sense. Like, how can the emerging tension between a new reading and an old reputation open up a space for conversation, a space of exchange? That's a question that we personally find interesting and that we see quite often happening in Belgian public space. I can give plenty of examples of different groups who use monuments to communicate their views. Like, this is an image of a group who made a manifeste pour le réattachement de la Belgique au Congo, like a manifest for the re-annexation of Belgium to Congo, in which they kind of they fight for the reunion of Belgium and Congo, but they kind of reverse the history. So in their manifest, like, Kinshasa would become the capital, and Lingala would become the official language of the United Countries. This is another example in which there is this statue of this small elephant, and underneath we see an image of a Belgian colonial officer and three Congolese individuals on the right, with the star representing an enlightenment in the middle. And underneath there is written, gevallen in dienst van de beschaving, fallen in name of civilization. And in the original version, there were the names of 5 or 6 people, Belgian people who served in the military in Congo under Belgian occupation. But this was replaced by a group of activists by the Roman connotation of the number 10 million, like bringing attention to those 10 million Congolese who also fell in a way in the name of civilization, one could say. But if there is one place that often returns in these kinds of protests, it is this particular statue that is standing in the center of Brussels, which kind of has an interesting location. This is a statue, once again, of King Leopold II, as I said, who was like the sole owner of Congo during the Free State period, who has his back to the royal palace, but is facing Matonge. And Matonge is like a neighborhood in Brussels where lots of members of the Congolese diaspora in Brussels are living. And this monument has been subject to lots of changes, lots of transformations. Like, it is a place where lots of official commemorations are taking place, but it's also a place where someone once made red hand-shaped marks on the pedestal, referring to this practice of cutting off hands. It's a place where someone once placed photographs of present-day mistreated Congolese women on the pedestal. It's a place where the lawn was once covered with cartoon images of a Belgian minister, in a way criticizing him for maintaining a positive relationship or a friendly relationship with President Kabila. And I could go on and give even more examples of different transformations that this monument has been to, in a way, all reflecting different discourses and reflecting different associations that are being made with this figure of King Leopold II. So this monument and its many transformations at one point caught my attention when I was working at the University of Antwerp, where I was doing a project with students, in which we got interested in this monument and how it kind of seems to provide a sort of perspective on different discourses that are present in Belgium on the colonial past, but also could be like a window to show surprising takes on history. So what we did in a project was kind of studying the contemporary function of the monument. What we would do is we would spend lots of time there, and over a period, I think it was over a period of 6 months, that we observed the monument. We talked to the people who were passing by. We were looking at the way it was used to kind of gain an insight in what are the contemporary functions of this monument, and are those functions primarily of a political nature, or are there other functions as well? And we kind of gained an insight in like the different social, political, and economical functions of this kind of charged space in Belgium. And I'm primarily sharing this particular project with you because this is like the point where Anne and me started working together. As I started working as a researcher, or more following academic convention in the beginning of my work as a researcher, but it's through this project in which we also made lots of photographs that I met Anne, who helped me and the students out with kind of translating this body of images that we made from the different uses of this statue into a sort of visual essay that could communicate our insights in a more playful and perhaps more fun and just more interesting way, I think, than we could if we would have followed more academic convention of writing like an article together.
Yeah, so I was doing a master documentary film when I was started working with Rob. And with the students, we made from all the observations, we took details and we made crops of these details and made this little book of the project. And after that, actually, the statue of Leopold II was also the starting point of Échangeur, the film we made together. Because we knew the statue has an exact replica in Kinshasa, but in Brussels, the statue is in a public space, but in Kinshasa, it's in a museum. So the starting point of the film was these monuments and the other monuments in the museum in Kinshasa. And we were also interested in what would be the life and the discourse around these monuments and what were the movements throughout the city. The monuments were removed in the 70s by Mobutu a dictator who was in power for 30 years, and he removed all the Belgian colonial statues out of the public space. Then they were in depots throughout the city for until the beginning of 2000, when all the monuments went to the National Museum in Kinshasa, where you can see them here. But the idea for the film was very open, because we had this interest in this life around the monuments and this discourse around the monuments. But we also knew we were never in Kinshasa before. So the idea was also to go there really open. We wanted to make a film, but we did not have a fixed idea yet. And it was also my work as a filmmaker. That's also an important part of that not starting with a fixed idea, but discovering and making a film at the same time. So in 2015, we went for the first time to Kinshasa, and we started working in the museum. We started filming, but in Kinshasa, a lot of things changed, especially when we started working together with Kinact. And Kinact is a performance festival, and it was happening at the same time when we were there. So the idea of the festival is that actually, in Kinshasa, a lot of artists, they don't really present their work in the city, but they want to present it in Western world. But the idea of the festival is really that the artists get to know the public in Kinshasa, and that Kinshasa gets to know their artists. And there, in this festival, we met a lot of artists who also worked in their daily practice with the colonial past. And in their performances, the narratives were much more layered and nuanced than the representation of the statues. So the idea for the film moved from this static representation to this more active representation, and the festival was like a starting point of a network. So. It was a starting point, and from there we started looking for more artists that were actively working with this shared past. For example, I don't know if you all have seen the film, but there is this character that plays on a daily basis, plays Lumumba, the first prime minister. He's also a taxi driver, but he's also a taxi driver as he's playing Lumumba. Or you have a Wijo Wiyombo, an artist that does like a ritual cleaning of the manholes in the city that still have the old name of Kinshasa, Leopold II. So there's several artists that work in different ways with this past. In this filming, for us, the relationship between in Kinshasa, it's really difficult to just go on the street and film. For us, it was really important the relationship between the filmmaker and the performer. We never filmed life as it is. We filmed life as it is performed by an artist. In a way, the artist. The performer was activating the filmmaker, and the filmmaker was activating the performer. And the performer also decided how the scene would go. And in this way, we looked for a balanced relationship. And the artists also really could. They also really play the game with us as filmmakers. And that was a really important part of our practice, to look for this balanced collaboration and power relation. But then, besides that, where you had the scenes where the relation between filmmaker and performer was really important, but here you can see a scene that there is moments that the artists also really are shown as the community makers as they are. So there is moments that here is Wijo Wiyombo performing with a huge puppet with the Congolese flag. and there is maybe 100 children dancing and singing with him, like he's doing it also on a daily basis to have these songs with the children. So in that moment, we are less present, and the artist as community maker becomes more present. In the film, in our practice, it's also really important that our position in the film is clear, that we are two European filmmakers that going there to make a film together with these artists. And we thought in the beginning that the way we filmed these performances, that it would be clear that we were present. But then in the editing, for us, it became really necessary to put some moments where you knew who was making this film. And we did it, for example, here you have like our Arkaboon or our Congolese friends who also direct questions to us. And we also tried it in images of reflection. And in our next film, we also go further with this.
No, so like Échangeur, the film we made is really for us part of an ongoing process that is taking on like very different forms. One thing we did that was kind of something that went hand in hand with the production of our film was this installation built by Quint and Vanessa, a close friend of ours, who made an exact replica of the plinth that is carrying the statue of Leopold II in Brussels at this very same square that I was just talking about. So it is really like a one-on-one wooden replica of this plinth in a way as an effort for us to connect this film that we were showing, like in the private space of the cinema, to the public space of the street, because that was in the end what the film was about the use of public space in communicating certain ideas and of question dominant narratives. So in a way, for us, it is a way of making a link, but it's also our desire to show the construction also of this way of representation, as I think that in a way the desire of the monument is to become a part of the city that seems like a natural extension, as something that has always been there, that will always will be there, and is not like an object that can be questioned. Well, we think by making this wooden replica, in which it's clear that the presence of this monument is also the outcome of a decision that a certain person or a group of persons made at a certain moment, is made explicit. When we showed the film in Antwerp, we put it across the street from the theater where we showed it. In Brussels, it was on the Beursplein, which is like a central square in Brussels. And perhaps we even succeeded more in creating a sort of tension when we did it in Brussels, when this wooden replica was at less than 500 meters from the original. So people walking by would actually recognize this shape and would perhaps start asking questions about what is this doing there. Of course, also with this installation, we want to add something to the debate in Belgium on what should we do with all those monuments, which I personally find a really relevant question, as it's kind of one of the only moments in which this very complex and abstract discussion on how do we relate to the colonial past becomes very concrete and simple in a way, as simple as what are we going to do with all those monuments? So the past year, we spent lots of time screening the film and organizing conversations and debates around it. And it's really out of the conversations we've been having about this film that a desire grew to start a new project and sort of a view on a certain practice was developing. As we had conversations in different contexts. We showed the film like in a more an artistic context, but also perhaps more in an academic context and in a more activist context. And we found ourselves talking a lot about the colonial past and the absence of discussion, but also about our position as filmmakers. And how does one do that, to be a Belgian filmmaker working in Congo? How can people collaborate that are linked through this historic colonial relationship without reproducing this colonial relationship? And I think in Échangeur we were already doing an effort in this by making this decision, as Anna said, to not like observe people, but really only work with people who are very aware of the camera and can perform that version of Kinshasa that they want to show. But we had lots of questions like, how can we go further in finding this balance? So I think it are these conversations about potential forms of collaborating, of working together, as well as the continued exchange with our friends in Kinshasa, that kind of laid the base for this new project that we just like returned from the filming process 5 days ago. I think it's not so much that we had the idea for this is what we want to, this is the story we want to tell, or this is the questions we want to see answered. It was rather, what is kind of a broader practice that we can develop? What kind of practice can we develop in which really a balance is sought between the people participating, and in which trust, exchange of ideas, and perhaps love even in a way is foundational.
So we started the project half a year ago by sending emails to 2 Congolese filmmakers we met in 2015. So we really wanted to start the collaboration from the beginning of the idea. So we sent some ideas and proposals, and they sent some ideas back, and that's how we created the idea for the film together. So the idea for the film is, it's again a film about this performing artist. It's a politically engaged performing artist in Kinshasa. And the idea is that the Congolese film team, Paul and Nizar, and the Belgian film team, that we make this film together, and that we also make a portrait of each other as filmmakers. So one part of the film will be the performances, and another part will be about the film process. And as you can see here, every performance is filmed by the 2 film crews. So you have always the 2 different cameras, 2 different way of handling the camera, different textures. So the left image is the one that Paul and Nizar made of the performances, and the right image is an image that we made. As you can see here, there is images of us filming each other and returning each other's gaze. That was something that was not present in Échangeur, but that was important for us now. Then, in the project, we have actually 3 kind of images. We have the performances, we have the returning gaze, film process images, and then we have a 3rd kind of image. And the idea was that while we film, between us there is a lot of conversations about the city, about the process, about the life in Kinshasa, about the history. There is a lot of interesting conversations that are not on film. And the idea is that we reenact these conversations really in a way like a fiction film is made. So we decided which themes we wanted to talk about, we decided which location, we decided who was going to play, and then we really filmed it like a fiction film, like you film, you do one action 3 times and you film it 3 times with a different angle. And the conversations most of the time were small and practical, but they touch upon bigger themes, like filmmaking in Kinshasa, like the economical crisis, like the neocolonialism present there, like the critical content of the performances that we filmed together. And this results in kind of scenes that have more like a focus and a concentration and a rest, like more than the scenes where we filmed the performances. So that's a bit like the concept of the film. But of course, while making this film, like the previous time, there is a lot of problems and difficulties with this concept. A first big thing is that there is a big difference between the conceptual practice of having a balanced collaboration and a sustainable collaboration, and making a film that communicates and touches. that's not always the same thing. So if we would go really for this totally balanced collaboration and we forget about the end result, maybe we would have like a chaotic end result. So we were constantly a bit thinking and talking about these things. For example, a first problem that we can see is that the two cameras and way of filming have different aesthetics. And we don't know yet now how these two aesthetics will fit together in editing. Like you can see here as well. Another problem was that the balance in the reenacted scenes, we couldn't really find a balance there because Paul and Nizar, the two Congolese filmmakers, were much more rich to portrait because they live the city and because they speak the language, and so it was difficult to make an equally present portrait of us and them. And also, like, if we did conversations between one of us and one of them, you had again the problem that our French is not as fluent as their French. So it's where these difficulties in making a balanced film. And then another problem is the editing, that it's artistically and practically really difficult to edit the film together. So now we're going to try to invite them to Belgium, but now it's really the beginning of a new period. Like, how will we edit the film? They have the images. They just, like 1 hour ago, they sent like some pictures of an edit they tried. So we now have to see how we will edit the film. And then there is some this is an image that they made us of us. There were, in these conversations with them, they made us conscious of a lot of things. For example, one is that they made us conscious of our tendency to still validate our work in the Western world. So we were telling them, like, we think it's more interesting if we make your portrait more present because it's more rich. And then they told us, yeah, but in Kinshasa, people they want to see a film about people that are not used to live in Kinshasa. They want to see a film with you in it. So it was constantly like that. That if there were proposals, there was always like this counter idea that we again became conscious of our blind spots. So that gives us questions about which form and which content works where. And that's a super big question. Another thing is that we, like in Échangeur, it was really important for us to make a positive and energetic image of Kinshasa. Like all the problems of the city, that you can experience it like a fertile ground for artistic practices. But then they told us, like, of course, you can see this way that the problems are fertile ground for artistic practices. But if we make film with you and we are in the film, then it's of key importance that we include the difficulties of the city, that we include the difficulties of our life. So you can see, for example, in the left image, you have Paul, and he told us, like, if people see me in the film as a filmmaker, well dressed, with a lot of language about film, I also want you to show me where I live. And because he's the place where he lives, he has really poor living conditions, and for them it was super important to include the difficulties and the big economical crisis of Kinshasa and the extremely difficult conditions where they live, they daily experience.
Yeah, so there it becomes really complex. Like, in a way, we we are very aware of this mainstream image of mainstream media image of Congo as like this devastated and horrible place that is war-ridden, and we think like we should do like it's important to provide kind of a counter image of all the positivity and the energy and the artistic imagination that is present there. But then also doing this, we are called back by our Congolese friends saying, yeah, but things are actually really difficult here, and it would not be like a decent image also if you try to work around those difficulties. So it's constantly there that we are like, yeah, kind of finding a balance between these different desires and trying also to be aware of where our desires are coming from. Because one thing that one will perhaps read or see in artists working in Kinshasa, perhaps people who are not living in Kinshasa but are making work there, is that in this more positive discourse, they will often emphasize like, yeah, things are really difficult, but these difficulties are also like a very fertile ground, as Anna said, for artists. There are lots of things to relate to, and there are so many fights that need to be fought. But then I think it's also really important to like nuance or problematize this kind of romanticized image of the relation between hunger and revolution and art, because in one way, yes, I think that Kinshasa provides a fertile ground in that sense, but I think it's also important to be aware that perhaps these difficulties are suffocating perhaps more people than it is actually like prompting to make artistic work. We see lots of talented performance artists in Kinshasa, but I ask myself the question: wouldn't they also like flourish in another context that is not so difficult? Is it really like the conditions that brought them to make this work, or is it just like they are the ones who were not suffocated? Like how many talented people are really blocked by the difficulties of the city? So that is something that we find important to kind of nuance. I think this over-romanticized image of the artist who finds its way and needs like the difficulties to be driven forward. I don't want to be cynical about it either, but it's important to make more nuanced statements about it, I think. Well, Anna was describing a number of problems that we faced in finding this balance between, on one side, a more conceptual exercise, really a view on what would it be to have perhaps a more decolonized film practice in which we are looking for a balance between all those people who participate, but at the same time having a desire to make a film that can actually communicate and can also touch people who are not part of the process. Because we are not that interested in making a film that could only work perhaps in an academic context in which like the different components can be taken apart and discussed. We really feel a desire to take part in a discussion and even open up that discussion. And if we can make a film that is accessible and is touching and is even fun and is fun to watch in a way, that would really help us in achieving our goals. So this is like a balance that is difficult to be found, I think. But then it is because of this desire to actually make a film that works as a film that we find ourselves not succeeding in really following up with all of our conceptual guidelines kind of that we made for ourselves. But I think in a way it's also not such a big of a problem. I think it's really making a film and having the desires that we have. It's not about striving towards like an absolute equilibrium. It's more about taking different steps, coming across problems and blind spots, and then once again trying to relate to those new problems that emerge. So I think our practice will be steered by just trying and making mistakes, and then trying anew. So, and I also don't see that as highly problematic. I think it is a process of balancing. Yes, and what I actually wanted to say, also related to this picture, is that at some points we noticed like, we did not succeed in what we wanted to do, but at other points we were kind of surprised by new collaborations that emerged that were not foreseen. Like this is an image of Janos and me, and I'm actually participating in one of his performances. And in this performance of Janos, which is really interesting in my opinion, he has this performance in which he returns the golden teeth of Lumumba back to Congo. As I don't know up to what level you are familiar with this history, but when Lumumba was murdered and his body was disposed of, a Belgian officer stole 2 golden teeth, and he brought them back to Belgium. And he told people there, like, I don't have the teeth anymore. I threw them in the sea. But a few years ago, they were discovered at his house. And then, of course, the question emerged, like, what should we do with these teeth? Shouldn't they be brought back to Congo? And that is kind of what, in an artistic way, Janos is doing, as he will walk around the city with his small carriage in which there is a large golden tooth. And he will make like a tour through the city to arrive at the statue, the monument of Lumumba. And while doing this, he will read a poem, actually a poem that is written by a Flemish poet on the teeth of Lumumba. And he would read this poem, and I would read a translation. I would read it in Lingala. But when we met and we were talking about, perhaps if you're interested, we are making this film, we can work together, we can film your performance. He said, yeah, but I would find it more interesting if you would participate in my performance. And it would be interesting if there's like also like a Belgian character who is there, and then we can like return this tooth or this teeth together. So what would happen is that I would join him in his tour through the city. I would read his same poem, but I would read it in Flemish, and he would read it in Lingala. And at some point we would exchange text, and I would try to read it in Lingala, and he would do it in Flemish, which was kind of funny. And for me personally, a really rich and powerful experience. So this is something that for us works both conceptually as on the level of making a film that communicates. As conceptually, we think it's interesting that there's this confusion between who is directing who is performing for whom. But also on the level of making a film that can speak to people, this may work, and we will see in editing, but perhaps we can introduce a sort of narrative in which my character, who goes from being the one who records the sound to someone who is like preparing himself to do his first performance and then actually performing. So perhaps this can work. We will see in editing. I'm just like pointing this out, that it is not only having a concept and then running against the walls. The walls of your problems, but it also lots of surprises there. Can bring you to like to new spaces. I think it will also be on this slide that we conclude our talk.
Yeah, but there is some time left if you want, but maybe it's a bit weird to do this.
Yeah. So we will not provide, there's like no like well thought out conclusion that we can give. Like I can only like emphasize once again that Échangeur, or broader practice as filmmakers, is ongoing, and that we are constantly looking for like a more balanced way of collaborating. I think these are really questions about collaboration that are taking like center stage in our work, and that we're just going to continue with questions such as how can different equally valuable views be aligned? How can we set up a sustainable dialogue between artists who have different frames of reference, who grow up in different contexts, who find themselves also on different ends of history? And what can we learn from the frictions and the harmonies that these dialogues bring forth? So I don't know, Anna, do you want to add something to that?
No, but we are happy to answer any question.
Есть ли у вас вопросы?
Thank you very much for your lecture. It was very interesting, and thank you for the fact that you participate in the show. I think your work works really, really good in the context of the show here in Russia, because it shows the current artistic scene as opposed to the previous artistic scenes that existed in up to 90s, I think. We end somewhere there. So it's very important for our audience to learn what is the practice now and what is the relationship of today's artists to what was before in popular painting. And you do it in a very elegant way without really, well, it's not didactic, and that is why the artists that you worked with during making of Échangeur really come alive, really become part of the exhibition, not because somebody narrates something about them, but because somebody is really in the moment of the practice. But what I wanted to ask you, we've talked about it a bit before, is what is filmmaking in Kinshasa like? I mean, you collaborate with filmmakers there, but what do they do usually outside collaborating with you? And what is the film industry there? And is industry too big a word to describe it?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to say about that. The thing, one big thing that the two Congolese filmmakers told us as a problem is that there is no film school in Kinshasa. So there is filmmakers, but there is not like a big industry. There is television, and one other big part is also that in Kinshasa, people don't like to be filmed. So it's super difficult to just go on the street and try to film something. The two Congolese filmmakers, they told us stories being arrested like several times. Also, so you've also problems as like white filmmakers. Then you have then other problems if you're like a local filmmaker. So it is in public space. It is super difficult to film. Yeah, maybe you can add something about that also.
Yeah, true. Like it's super difficult to film in public spaces in Kinshasa. Also, when we go there, we have like this permission of the Ministry of Media. But even with this document, which is quite expensive, which costs us like $250, it is still, we will be harassed practically all the time by police officers and by the military. So it's absolutely not an easy thing to do to make a film in Kinshasa, and people will generally a lot of people will respond negatively to the camera, and this can be for various reasons. We had like several conversations about this as well. Like one thing that people will tell you is that like under Mobutu's reign it was forbidden. You could not like film in public space, and a lot of people still live with this memory of it being forbidden. At the same time, people will see you with a camera, therefore assume that you have lots of money. So if you're going to film, then you will have to pay them as well. And then there is this kind of paranoia that is kind of part of Kinshasa in a way, that we noticed, or towards cameras at least, like questions of espionage and the idea of perhaps you will use my image in a way that will not benefit me, but will only cause me problem.
Yeah, and always you hear like you will make a lot of money with the film, and then but it's really understandable because there is a lot of Western filmmakers or journalists that come and take photos and pictures, but that's also like a conversation with a lot of these artists is also about money. It's not that we have a really good friendship with them, but money is also a part of our discussions.
I think this was something that was initially really hard for us to comprehend, as we are kind of used to keeping money outside of our personal relationships. While with some of our friends, some of the artists we work with, we just the unbalance in like our possibilities is really a dimension of our relationship as well. So people are like, I would love to go with you as a friend, but I also cannot pay for my transportation, or I cannot pay for food if I go with you, because I will not have time to work to make enough money to feed myself. And this was really complicated for us to understand in the beginning, as then we were thinking like, what does it mean if people want to work with us, if they want to join, as we kind of had like an entourage making this film, as people would go with us if you go film a performer somewhere. And it was kind of hard to get our head around how money in this imbalance is just part of your relationship. Without that, you can really reduce your relationship to we have money and you don't have money. It's just like, it's a dimension of our personal relationships. At the same time, obviously, we don't have great. This is an independent film. We don't have great budgets doing that. But yes, we have more money than the artists we are working with, obviously. So. Really complicated.
So you basically commissioned those performances. Is that what you're
commissioned in the sense that we
paid for the performance to do what
yeah,
they did?
In a way with Échangeur, it was not the case. Mm-hmm. So then it was more like the things that were happening at the moment. maybe accept the performance of Wijo cleaning the manhole. That was something he did in 2012, and he did again for us. But in this film, it was really like a collaboration from the beginning. So we also had discussion with the artists about the performances. So and we paid the material, but we didn't pay people to do. But we could pay the material, the transport, and the eating and drinking.
Yeah, and we would be like as transparent as we can about like our own financial situation, also having like some dossier spending, and of course the moment we have money from an external source, it will also flow to the artist and to the other filmmakers and to us, because we are also at this point, of course, not making money making films. But it is really an important part of our practice. These questions about money, they are just very present and very important also to dedicate enough attention to that, I think. But it's complicated, yeah, for sure.
Still, concerning your film collaborators in Kinshasa, what do they usually do? Now they're filming with you, but how did you meet? What did you see by them? What do they do as filmmakers?
Yeah.
Could you
So their process of the Nizar was before working as a designer, and Paul, I know, but they both did a couple of years ago. There was a French film school that did a course in Kinshasa. So all the teachers of ENSAS, the French film school, went to Kinshasa, and they had courses for a couple of months, and they were together in these courses. And after that, they what they do, they have a small camera, and they try to sometimes they do small jobs for money. Nizar also does still the designing to make money, and they often work with foreign film crews that come for television. They work on the sets, so they have periods of work, and then they have their own documentary practice as well. Like Paul is also working on a feature documentary, and we also this period we help with making a dossier about this documentary. So they work constantly. So they also had a new project for August, but it goes slow. It's really like he told us, like then in a couple of months maybe I have like $100, and then I put it in my own film, and then that's how it goes. But for example, now his battery charger was broke, so he was like, oh, fuck the project of August. How am I going to do it? Because the charger, I can also only buy it in Europe. And now, so yeah, it's all these things make the process slow. So
yeah, but you also see if it works out and we can actually make a film out of these images, that Paul and Nizar are like highly passionate. They're super passionate about filmmaking. They cannot stop talking about it, and it's also in a way sometimes the conversations even seem too theatrical. But it's really the way there's so much love in the way they talk about cinema that they just find ways that allow them to make films.
Yeah. For him, it's for them, and I really believe it when they say it, even if it sounds theatrical, that it's really a way of surviving. That it's not like, okay, you need food, but it's sometimes living in the cities for them is so depressing. But the idea of cinema, watching films, talking about films, making films, is really like the engine for them. It's yeah.
I've heard this from one of the curators of the show, Bambi Keupens from the Tervuren Museum, and she told me that there are like 2 cinemas in Congo, cinema theaters. Is it that true? Yes, one in Kinshasa, the other one in Lubumbashi, into big cities, just 2 cinemas,
yeah.
And they show porn mostly. Is that true? So what I'm trying to ask is, what kind of cinematic experience do these guys have? What are they favorite movies? What are they aspiring to, based on what are they?
It's crazy what they have seen. They've seen like a lot more old classic films than us. Mm-hmm. But what they do is they download everything and they watch it themselves. Mm. So even every documentary about Congo, they have seen everything, like even small project that we thought were small, but they've seen a lot. But they all download it in the night when it's faster, and then they watch it sometimes on their phone and sometimes on their computer. But cinema, they don't go a lot to the cinema. So
but at the same time, there are lots of like screenings being organized in Kinshasa, which were like we just have a projector and a wall, and there will be lots of. That's also how we because we were in Kinshasa also to show Échangeur, and we had like numerous. Projections in that sense, that we would like just put a beamer somewhere in the framework of the festival we were working with, and then people would pass by and those interested would like stay and watch the film. So there's a lot of moving images in Kinshasa, but like your art house style theaters, cinemas, it's difficult to find. I think there are some. I think there's more than one cinema in Kinshasa because they are cinemas also connected to some European institutions, like to you have like this Association Wallonie-Bruxelles, and you have the Goethe Institute, and you have like some. There are some opportunities, but it's very little. It's true.
Yeah, and it's also that their influence is not from that places. True. It's really internet and.
So my last question really concerns Belgium again. I'm asking this basically of anyone who comes during this public program to us, but what is the level of public awareness of the colonial past of Belgium? And do you think it's too low now? And what is to be done? The revolutionary question, what is to be done with this?
I think there's a lot to be done. That's for sure. There is little discussion on colonialism in Belgium, but I do feel that the discussion is in a way accelerating the past years. Like I think, up till the early 90s, even there was like almost like absolute silence. Also within the arts and within academia, there was very little happening. While now there are more within academia, within the arts, there is more attention for the colonial past, and more often, like different actions or events are also entering the mainstream. Like these appropriations of these monuments I was talking about, this is happening quite more frequently now, and this would also be picked up by mainstream media, while it wouldn't perhaps 5 or 10 years ago. This is of course based on just my personal observation. It's not something that I can really. I can prove in numbers or anything, but my observation would be that there is definitely like an active discussion, but it's really in the margins. But this active discussion is finding more and more like entries to the mainstream. Also like this Zwarte Piet discussion, like that I mentioned earlier. That is something that was really that has been like a really hot topic in the Netherlands for some time, and now it found its way to like the Belgian mainstream as well. But it's not always leading to interesting outcomes. As like this discussion, for example, was really hijacked by populist politicians who are saying, "Can you see how the intellectual left is completely out of touch with normal people because we are not racist, but we love Zwarte Piet and we love Sinterklaas." So it's no longer about like racial discrimination or colonialism. So it's really, there is an active debate, but it's difficult to enter the mainstream, and when it does, it's not always successfully. And what is out to be done? There is incredible amount of racism and racial-based discrimination in Belgium. And I think an interesting way of tackling this understanding is this is talking from like a decolonial or post-colonial perspective, and really understanding the historic roots of these forms of discrimination. I think one way of doing this is through education, But another way is like through representations in public space, and that is like a strategy that more and more groups seem to be using. And making films about it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Есть ли еще у кого-нибудь вопросы?